Great. Thank you, everyone. Good morning. Good morning to everyone, and welcome to our regularly scheduled meeting for the Board of Public Works for Friday, February 11, 2022. Dr. Campos?
Good morning, everyone. Fernando Campos, Executive Officer, establishing roll call and quorum for today. It's 10:16 a.m. when we started. We'll start the roll call at this time. We have Vice President Garcia, President Pro Tem Davis, Commissioners Caloza and Villegas. Madam Chair, you do have a quorum at this time. Currently, we do not have any callers on the line under general public comment. We also do not have any commentary under the Neighborhood Council comment section. We did receive one commentary on item number 1 through our Google form, and we also have one individual on item number 4, should your board wish to open that item up. There has been a request to continue item number 4 to Friday, March 4th, 2022 by the Bureau of Engineering to allow additional time for funding, identification of the project, and then also a request to continue item number 5 and 6 to Friday, February 18th, 2022. Again, item number 4, request to continue to March 4th. Item 5 and 6 to continue to Friday, February 18th, 2022, if there's no objections from your board.
No objections on my end. Any objections, Commissioners? Nope. Hearing none, that's fine. And public comment can be taken on number 4 on March 4th.
Yes, and we notified the caller, and he was okay with waiting until then.
Okay, perfect, great. So, colleagues, we have, based on the administrative list that we just went down, we have items 1, 2, and 3 today. I'm going to go a little bit out of order. First, I'm going to approve the minutes. Then I'm going to do items 2 and 3. Once we close, then we're going to finalize with item 1. So we have a couple of items to take care of first before we get to our final item. Any objections on that? Okay, great. Thank you. So with that said, the 6th is now to the approval of the minutes for meeting of Friday, January 28, 2022. Is there a second to my motion to approve the minutes?
Second.
Thank you, Dr. Davis. Dr. Campos, you want to call roll call on that?
Yes, this is to adopt the minutes. Motion by Commissioner Garcia, seconded by Commissioner Davis. We'll start the voting tabulation. We'll start with you, Madam Chair.
Aye.
President Pro Tem Davis.
Aye.
Commissioner Caloza.
Aye.
And Commissioner Villegas.
Aye.
This motion is adopted and carries unanimous.
Great, thank you. Now that leads us now to our second item of today's business. We are moving on to item number 2 of today's agenda. This is an item for Office of Community Beautification, contract amendment and budget increase for various offices of the community beautification contracts. Recommending the board to 1, authorize the Office of Community Beautification to execute a contract amendment with the Coalition for Responsible Community Development to increase the ceiling amount of an existing contract by an additional amount of $8 million. 2, authorize the Office of Community Beautification to execute a contract amendment with the Korea Youth and Community Center to increase the ceiling amount of an existing contract by an additional amount of $6,576,660 and to allow the Bureau of Sanitation to piggyback on the same contract for tree planting services. 3, authorize the Office of Community Beautification to execute a contract amendment with Gang Alternatives Program to increase the ceiling amount of an existing contract by an additional amount of $8 million. Number 4, authorize the Office of Community Beautification to execute a contract amendment with the Northeast Graffiti Busters to increase the ceiling amount of the contract by an additional amount of $6 million and to allow the Bureau of Street Services to piggyback on the contract. Number 5, authorize the Office of Community Beautification to execute a contract amendment with Pacific Graffiti Solutions to increase the ceiling amount of an existing contract by an additional amount of $5 million. And 6, authorize the President or 2 members of the Board of Public Works to execute the contract amendments after approval as to form has been obtained by the City Attorney. And Paul Roch is here from the Office of Community Beautification to present on this item. Paul? Good morning.
Yes, good morning. Paul Roch, Director of the Office of Community Beautification. As mentioned today, we are requesting board approval to increase the ceiling amounts of several contracts that OCB maintains with nonprofit community-based organizations, which are providing various services throughout the city of Los Angeles. These services include graffiti removal, public right-of-way cleanup, tree maintenance, tree planting, tree watering, and other as-needed services. Several of these OCB contractors have reached or are coming close to reaching the funding threshold of their contracts, which were originally approved by the board in July of 2020. These contracts are all part, or these contractors are all serving as part of the Clean LA program, which has provided additional funding to them and has increased the, help get them to the ceiling threshold of their contracts. Additionally, these contractors have in many cases received supplemental funding from their local city council offices for specific services in their geographic regions. They've received reprogrammed LAPD funding for beautification services, as well as additional funding for graffiti abatement. Further, the Bureau of Sanitation is requesting authority to piggyback on the contract with Koreatown Youth and Community Center for tree planting and maintenance services as part of their Route for the Future grant project. And the Bureau of Street Services is requesting authority to piggyback on the contract with Northeast Graffiti Busters for tree watering, tree maintenance, and litter abatement as part of a project along Colorado Boulevard in the community of Eagle Rock. Commissioner Garcia ran down the specific ceiling amounts, so I won't go over those. These are all contracts which have exceeded at least by 66% of the original contract ceiling amount. These contractors have all been providing an increased level of service over the past 2 years. They've been doing tremendous work, and these various projects are likely to continue to receive funding. Therefore, board approval is requested on these items, and I would be ready to answer any questions that the commission may have. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Mr. Raj. Nice to see you today, too. Commissioners, any questions on item number 2? We'll start with Commissioner Calosa.
Great. Thank you, Madam Chair. Thanks for your presentation, Mr. Raj. I had a few follow-up questions. Thanks for presenting this item. And this is a really important program for the community and for the council offices, as well as the mayor's office. And thanks to Commissioner Garcia for all her work on the Clean LA program. I know she worked a lot on that. For the disbursement of these funds, this is a lot of money for different nonprofits, which is great. We want to continue to see these investments in the community, but just curious why some council offices were left out. It seems like some of the funding for that's utilized in these contract amendments are citywide. So I know it sounds like, just curious if you can explain why there are some council districts left out of this amendment.
Right. So again, we're not at this point putting any specific funding into these contracts. What the board would be approving would be to raise the sort of contract ceiling threshold, and then funds are placed in as funds are dedicated through notices to proceed. There are other contractors that are performing the same type of work. They just have not come close to exceeding the contract ceiling threshold, and so they were not included in this particular board report. But the Clean LA program, the graffiti abatement program, all of our programs are citywide. It's just a case where these particular contracts, in a lot of cases, because they've received additional funding from council offices, received reprogrammed LAPD funds last year, or again, some of these contractors do receive more Clean LA funds because they're running more Clean LA crews. And so for a variety of reasons, they've just come close to reaching the funding threshold of their contract. And so we're just, again, just raising the ceiling cap to allow us to put additional funds in as needed in the future.
Understood. But those funds are coming. That's why we are raising the ceiling cap.
That is correct. Yes.
Right. So I understand this is raising just the ceiling, but that funding is coming.
Yes.
And so to clarify, will those NTPs come before the board for approval, or is OCB issuing those NTPs directly?
Yeah, OCB issues the NTPs. Each individual funding account does not, come to the board for approval.
And that's standard process?
Yes.
And I can follow up with you offline, but I would love to see more details about, some of these investments. They're very large ones, they're important ones, but would love to see more details about what exactly the funding is going towards. I know there's mention of, some abatement, some tree planting. Would like to understand how some of these nonprofits were selected over others in terms of the specific disbursements, and would also love to know how many jobs these investments are creating. I don't need you to have the numbers right now, but I'm assuming and hopefully this will result in more hiring at these individual nonprofits to help with all this influx of work that I'm sure they'll be getting to spend these dollars to further clean up our communities. So,
No, I'd be happy to meet with you and kind of go over the specifics. And yes, absolutely, jobs are a big part of it. Just through the Clean LA program, our goal is to provide 200 jobs to residents of the city of Los Angeles. Graffiti abatement provides over 100 jobs. The Clean Streets program provides approximately 30 jobs. So, yes, I mean, this will, by increasing the ceiling cap, it will allow us to either continue those jobs in many cases as they to continue to receive funding, or provide new job opportunities as well.
Okay, great. Thank you, Mr. Raj. And I don't have any further questions. Thank you, Commissioner Garcia.
Thank you, Commissioner Pelosa. Dr. Davis, any questions for Paul Raj?
Yeah, so you're saying that the capacity of funding has been extended through this motion so that we will be able to increase the amount that each of the agencies will be able to spend, but that money has not arrived as of yet. Is that correct?
That is correct for the most part. We do have, like for this year's budget, we still do have Clean LA money that has not been encumbered into specific contracts. That happens sort of as they hire additional participants in the program, but also because in certain cases, the contract ceiling amount has been reached, and so we need to increase that threshold in order to provide the additional funding.
So some of these multiple sources of funding are coming from CDBG funds from the federal government. Do we have that?
That is correct. $1 million has been provided for the Clean LA program via the CDBG program, and those funds would go into several of these contracts. That's correct.
Now, one of the variables we did not discuss in this motion is the fact of the reality of, for example, graffiti. Graffiti is not equal to all constituents, to all council districts, or is it? Is it
No,
the
it's not.
same amount? Okay, so there's not the same amount.
It's not the same amount, and there's not the same amount of graffiti in all districts either.
That is correct.
Yeah.
So therefore, then, the reality of the data will be accordingly in terms of where the frequency of the service is provided is in, obviously, the areas where there is the most graffiti. So
Yes.
that variable in and of itself has a lot to do with the skewed presentation of the funding based upon council districts that are included and based upon where a majority of the repeated of graffiti exists. Is that pretty accurate?
That is pretty accurate. Yes, sir.
Okay. What is the time limit of these ceiling budgets? Is it just for this upcoming fiscal year, or how do we analyze it?
The contracts are in effect through June of 2023, so about another year and a half.
Okay. And we mentioned that we are trying to hire individuals in those various areas where the graffiti exists. And I guess we have already hired most of them. Is there, through this increase, any potential for the increase of people that we will hire as well from these districts?
Yes, there is. Both through the public right-of-way cleanup programs, through Clean LA, and also through the graffiti removal program. We do have some additional funding that we want to put into contracts specifically to hire more people to remove more graffiti. Absolutely.
Now, you also had a summer program. Is that a separate program and apart from the regular standard program you do during the regular year?
We do try to set aside some funding for the hiring of summer youth workers, and hopefully this summer we will be able to do that. The last 2 summers, because of the situation with COVID, it's been, we've been able to hire a few summer youth workers, but not nearly as many as in, kind of before COVID. But we have set aside some funding for the hiring of summer youth workers this coming summer, and these ceiling increases would also allow us to put those funds in as well.
Great. Okay, thank you so much. I appreciate the report. We look forward to the expanding the capacity, and more importantly, looking forward to including more people from the various impacted districts into the employment roles through this program. So thank you so much for the presentation, and we look forward to the future of this program.
Great. Thank you, Dr. Davis. And Commissioner Villegas.
I don't have any questions. Thank you for your report, Mr. Raj. I just like the line of questioning that my colleague mentioned, Commissioner Davis. Since 2020, we've seen so many protests, and it's a sign of the times. We cannot change what's happened. We increased in crime, increased in, a lot of graffiti throughout Los Angeles. This is a good use of public funds. It's our responsibility to, maintain. So I appreciate the report. Thank you.
Great, thank you.
Great. Thank you, Commissioners. Is there a motion to move this item forward?
So moved.
I'll second. That was a motion by Dr. Davis, moved by myself. Dr. Campos, do you want to call roll call?
Absolutely, Madam Chair, and if I could, Fernando Campos, Executive Officer, these contracts, or the item before you does raise the contract ceiling for these contracts, and it in compliance with Executive Directive number 3, I'd like to propose that your board consider making the motion subject to the mayor's approval, if possible. Otherwise, we can go ahead and start the voting tabulation as proposed.
No, let's amendment with subject for mayor approval. I had forgotten that. Thank you.
Great. And Dr. Davis, are you okay with the friendly amendment to your motion to adopt
absolutely.
item number 1?
Absolutely.
Great. So the motion is to adopt item number 2 as amended, subject to the mayor's approval, seconded by Commissioner Garcia. And we'll go ahead and start the voting tabulation at this time. We'll start with you, Madam Chair.
Aye.
President Pro Tem Davis.
Aye.
Commissioner Caloza.
Aye.
And Commissioner Villegas.
Aye.
This motion is adopted and the item is approved as amended. Madam Chair, would you like to consider this item to go forthwith?
Yes, please.
Thank you.
Great. We're good now?
Yes, we are. Thank you.
Okay, good. Thank you, Mr. Raj, for your presentation, and have a good weekend.
Thank you. Good weekend to all of you as well.
Thank you. All right, colleagues, we're moving on to item number 3. This is a contract award in Council District 3. This is for Baker Electric, Inc. This is for Reimagine Ventura Project Phase 1, recommending the board to 1, declare Baker Electric Inc. sole bidder to be the lowest responsible bidder and award Baker a contract for the Reimagine Ventura Project Phase 1 for $1,371,535 and two, authorize the president or two members of the board to execute the contract after approval as to form has been obtained from the city attorney's office. Thank you. And I think we have here Mr. Brown and I see Mr. John Borghese. Sorry if I said your name incorrectly. Who's doing the presentation today?
It'll be John Borghese, that's myself.
Okay.
Good morning, Commissioners, Garcia, Villegas, and Caloza, and Dr. Davis. I'm joined also today with by Scott Brown, who will be assisting me if there are any additional questions.
Okay.
So we're recommending the Board of Public Works to declare Baker Electric the sole bidder, the lowest responsive bidder, and award Baker a contract for the Reimagine Ventura project, Phase 1, for $1,371,535. The project essentially is an infrastructure enhancement project that balances the roadway facilities for all users on Ventura Boulevard between Royer and Sale. It also improves pedestrian amenities, creates a sense of place, and improves overall safety by making strides towards Vision Zero. Essentially, it consists of reverse angle parking to increase overall parking capacity, improvements to bicycle facilities, improvements to pedestrian facilities, and traffic calming measures. The improvements to bicycle facilities mainly consist of buffered bike lanes, dotted lane stripes and green paint at intersections and driveways, fewer conflicts with reverse angle parking, and benefits to bikes with the addition of signals at Royer Avenue and Ponce Avenue. The improvements to pedestrian facilities include new pedestrian crossings on Ventura Boulevard at Royer Avenue, where we're going to have a full signal, and at Ponce Avenue, where there's going to be a pedestrian hybrid beacon. There are also going to be trees, landscape, sidewalk improvements, and curb extensions that's going to be part of a later Phase 2 project. The scope essentially consists of the installation of 11 curb ramps, most of them at these signalized locations, traffic signals, a full traffic signal at Royer Avenue, a pedestrian hybrid beacon at Ponce Avenue, and some minor traffic signal improvements at Fallbrook Avenue. There's going to be a resurfacing of approximately 3,000 feet, striping, signage, wheel stops, and parking meters. The work to be contracted out includes curb ramps, installation of traffic signals and street lights, signs, wheel stops, parking meter posts. Work to be done by city forces. The street resurfacing will be done by Streets LA. LADOT will install the striping and furnish the parking meters, and LADOT will also do the construction management. Baker Electric was the sole bidder. Its bid is 31% higher than the engineer's estimate. However, after evaluating the bid, the staff believes that the sole bidder is reasonable and the unit prices submitted by the lowest bidder are balanced. The staff also believes that re-advertising the project will not likely attract additional or lower bidders as the prices of the materials and traffic signal equipment has gone up. Baker Electric has pledged SBE of 2.17%, EBE of 2.17%, and OBE of 26.93%. Funding for this project is from the Ventura Boulevard, Coahuila Boulevard Corridor Specific Plan. This project is supported by the community and the 3rd Council District Office. I now leave the floor open to any questions that you may have.
Great. Thank you, Mr. Verghese. I appreciate your presentation there. Mr. Brown, do you want to have anything to add to Mr. Verghese's presentation?
No, I have nothing to add.
Okay, you're here for questions. Got it. Thank you. Commissioners, any questions on this item? We'll start with Dr. Davis.
What is the time period of the project in terms of what we anticipate it will take to complete the project in terms of time?
It's 240 days is the contract time, but it could be done even earlier because this is a fairly small project.
Okay, and so since it's so small, the business inclusion really wasn't that great on the project, huh? What were the pledging? Yeah. What's the pledging numbers? It would really.
The numbers. SBE was 2.17%, EBE was 2.17%, and OBE was 26.93%.
Mm-hmm. And so you have expressed that we really do need to get this project going, and it would be much more beneficial to us to move forward with the offer that we have, right?
Yes, because the prices have gone up since we bid it out, and we also had a fatality at one of the locations just a week back. So the council office was very eager to move this project forward.
Sure. Thank you so much for the report, and we look forward to hopefully moving forward on this item. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Dr. Davis. Commissioner Villegas, any questions on this item?
Appreciate the report. It's a good project. I don't have any questions. Thank you.
Got it. Thank you. And Commissioner Calosa, any questions?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I don't have any questions either. I agree. I think the rebidding now would probably not be in best interest, knowing that so many of the projects we're bidding out now are coming in like 15 to 30% high sometimes. So thanks for your report, and thanks for GOT's work on this.
Great. Thank you, Commissioner Calosa. That's all for our questions. Is there a motion on the table to move this item forward?
So moved.
Moved by Dr. Davis. Is there a second?
I'll second that.
And second by Commissioner Villegas. Dr. Campos, there's a motion on the table by Dr. Davis and second by Commissioner Villegas. Should we do roll call?
Absolutely, Madam Chair. We'll start with you.
Aye.
President Pro Tem Davis.
Aye.
Commissioner Calosa.
Aye.
And Commissioner Villegas.
Aye.
This motion is adopted and is carried unanimous. Madam Chair, would you like to consider item number 3 to go forthwith?
Yes, please.
Thank you.
All right, Mr. Verhesi and Mr. Brown, have a good weekend. Thank you for your time today.
Thank you, Board, and thank you, Dr. Fernando.
Thank you. Have a good weekend. All right, colleagues, now this takes us to our final item for today's meeting. This is item number 1. And we have a couple of folks here today that will be joining us item number 1. I'll give the slide presentation, the start of the queue for that, then I'll go to any public comment. Dr. Campos, if there is none, then I'm going to hand it over to Commissioner Villegas, who will be leading today's presentation on this item. Any objections with that, colleagues? Okay. So first and foremost, welcome to everybody that's here on the Hyperion Water Reclamation Plant, the incident that happened on July 11, 2021. We have a presentation facilitated by UCLA professor Mr. Stenstrom, who served as an advisor to the ad hoc committee for the Board of Public Works. Following his presentations, there'll be some questions and answers from our commissioners. We have several other guests with us also as well, who helped put this report together, special advisors at this time. And then we also have our previous former President Greg Good, who is on the line. And then we also have our Director of Sanitation, Barbara Romero, on the line, and the executive team at Sanitation as well is on the line for any questions as well, commissioners. With that said, I'm going to read actually, before I read that, I'm into the record. Dr. Campos, do we have any public comment?
No, we do not. On item number 1, there was just one comment that was submitted via Google form that has been distributed to all commissioners.
Okay, understood. Just, to be clear, this is the time for public comment. From now until we read it into the record, it's going to be the presentation and then Q&A by commissioners. Just making that clear. Okay, good. No more public comment. We're closing public comment on this item. This is item number 1. This is a Hyperion Water Reclamation Plant Sewer Discharge Incident Ad Hoc Advisory Committee Report. This is a summary report relative to a third party of internal assessments of the Hyperion Water Reclamation Plant incident of July 11, 2021, to identify the causes of the incident as well as other conclusions regarding recovery, communications, costs, and recommendations to avoid reoccurrence of similar future incidents. And with that on the record, I pass it over to my colleague, Commissioner Villegas.
Thank you. Appreciate that, President Garcia. Welcome everyone to today's meeting. And as you heard, we will be taking up this item and just reviewing and presenting just some findings and recommendations on the report that was done by advisors that both Greg and I, former President Good and I, invited to participate. Over the last 6 months, we recruited a group of diverse stakeholders as our advisors to further explore the causes of the incident and to make recommendations, improvements to our operations and protocols, basically to prevent this from happening again in the future. Bureau of Sanitation engaged 2 third-party consultants. The board formed our ad hoc to oversee, scrutinize, and review their findings, and coupled with our own findings to compile the report. And we include short, intermediate, and long-term recommendations. And that's the information that you'll be listening to today, the presentation. And while the devastating incident exposed some previously unknown issues, we're learning and making changes going forward. And I think that's what we really want to focus on. The information that will be shared with this board has also been shared with the Bureau of Sanitation, and as you heard, they're joining us today. And since the incident, Hyperion staff and their vendors have been diligently just cleaning up the facility and just removing excess sludge and making the needed repairs. And as we mentioned, our group of advisors is comprised of about 13 folks. I'm just going to read off their names so we just have them on record and so that you all know who we're dealing with. So the advisors include Professor Stenstrom, who will do the presentation for us. He's principal author and committee advisor of the report, and he's a distinguished professor at UCLA. We also have with us Ms. Felicia Marquez, and she is former chair in California State Water Resources Control Board. Dr. Mark Gold, a deputy director for the California Natural Resources Agency. We have Gary Lee Moore, who was a part of this group as well, our city engineer for the city of Los Angeles. Carol Parks, our general manager for LA Emergency Management Department. Elias Sassoon, he's the director of El Segundo Department of Public Works, a neighbor just in Hyperion. And Marcel Anaya, he's acting lead operator for liquids section at Hyperion plant. We also have Mr. Bruce Resnick. He's the executive director for the LA Waterkeepers. Ms. Tracy Quinn, director for the California Water Conservation and Efficiency at the Natural Resources Defense Council. We also have with us Robert Ferrante. He's the chief engineer and general manager for LA County Sanitation District. Dr. Shelley Luce, who's the CEO of Heal the Bay. Ms. Keisha Powell, she's president of NACWA, and also she's the COO, of DC Water. And last, and definitely not least, an important voice for us was Mr. Donald Smith. He is a retired chairman of the MWH and former Hyperion plant manager. So those are the folks that joined us to be able to do this report today and have a presentation on it. I will stop talking and I'm going to let former President Good speak as well. So I'll let you have the floor.
Thank you. Good morning, everybody. It is a genuine pleasure. I'm Greg Good. I come with no title and no presumption. I'm just here as someone who cares about this work, and it's a real pleasure and honor to participate. I want to really start by saying good morning and thank you to Vice President Garcia, President Davis, Commissioner Colosa, and of course Commissioner Villegas. It's wonderful to see y'all. You guys are cooler than the other side of the pillow running this board. It's fun to see y'all up here, even if only in Zoom. So thank y'all. I also want to thank and say hello to Dr. Fernando Campos, our executive officer, and our deputy executive officer, TJ Knight, both of whom were really crucial and fundamental in this work. It's good to see y'all. Although Fernando, you're keeping your camera off, but it's good to see and hear you. I want to thank our city attorney, Ted Jordan, who I know isn't here today, but also city attorney Tania Isagede, as well as city attorney Adina Hoppenstand, all of whom were part of this. Adina put in a lot of work, has put a lot of work in on this issue, and it's good to see y'all, and thank you for y'all's work. It's really great to see the board family and the department's family and the bureau's families, or the family, and then obviously our committee of advisors, which we'll come to here shortly, including my partner in crime, Michael Stenstrom. Hello, Michael. So, coming off of July 11th, the Bureau of Sanitation jumped into very quick action. I can tell you, I remember sitting with Bureau Director Romero and Mr. DeFeda and Tracy Minamide hours after this happened on July 11th, and looking outside at what was happening at Hyperion, and the Bureau of Sanitation moved fast. They almost immediately engaged a couple of third-party consultants. They engaged their own universe of expertise, and committed to get to the bottom of what all was happening and what all happened, and to, as importantly, make the emergency repairs necessary to get Hyperion back at its high-functioning state. As the oversight board, as the effective general manager of the Department of Public Works, the Board of Public Works held an extremely well-attended town hall meeting to hear from experts, to hear from community about the impacts, about how sanitation was working with the community, both of El Segundo, but also neighboring communities in the city of Los Angeles, and really, most importantly, to figure out moving forward how to prevent occurrence or recurrence and ensure that the plant's resilience in the future. Toward that end, the first board meeting after that town hall, I introduced a motion, and my esteemed colleagues helped move or approved with the second of Commissioner Villegas, a motion to establish an ad hoc advisory committee with the authority, that committee being me and Commissioner Villegas, with the authority to then avail ourselves of, reach out to, and form a committee of advisors to help us, in, as Commissioner Villegas said, A, to really provide scrutiny and review of the third-party consultant work and the Bureau of Sanitation's work over their findings, and really push and continue to push in that process, and to, in essence, compile findings and come up with findings, and you all see the report, but then, as importantly, to identify short, intermediate, and long-term recommendations for the future of Hyperion, not only in remedying what had happened, but to prepare Hyperion for the future. And that's a process that Professor Stenstrom will walk through in greater detail and much more elegantly and poetically and intellectually than I will. So that said, I'm excited to finally see the work come to fruition. I think it is crucial work. And before handing it over to Mike, I want to just add a couple of things. One, I want to thank Joey, Cindy Bassett, and TJ Knight for all of their incredible work in terms of facilitating this ad hoc committee of advisors. Thank y'all. We would not have gotten to the work without all of y'all's cat wrangling. We had 13 superstars as advisors on this. A absolute murder's row of water experts and reclamation plant experts and from all over the nation. Cindy and Joey and TJ were really the key facilitators in making sure that we had everybody together. As Mike will tell you, we had at least 9 meetings of all these folks. Could never have pulled this off in person, by the way. And so thank you, Joey. Thank you, TJ. And thank you so much, Cindy, who I know is definitely there. I also think it's very important to thank the Bureau of Sanitation. For one, opening your collective chests to this process. Essentially putting down defenses and digging in with the third-party consultants that you work with, but also, and importantly, with the committee of advisors in really committing to getting to the root of the challenges, what happened, and then really thinking hard about next steps. And in particular, I want to thank Tracy Mide, Tim DeFeda, Hassan Kim, Ron Mayuyu, and then, it would be absurd not to acknowledge the leadership of Bureau Director Barbara Romero. Lest anyone forget, this really incredible happening or incident occurred nary days after Barbara took over the Bureau of Sanitation. Talk about a trial by fire. It was astonishing. And Barbara's leadership with the Bureau, within the public works community on this process, and the spirit of generosity and openness and collaboration and commitment to moving forward, made the findings and the conclusions and the recommendations even more possible, but B, portend a great future for Hyperion and for our water future in the city. So I really want to thank you, Barbara, and I want to thank all of your team. And as part of that also for already jumping in and implementing some of the recommendations in this report and really doing the hard work immediately, including addressing the needs of surrounding communities. The panel of advisors, thank you all so much, and I apologize y'all for being self-indulgent. Forgive me. It's the last time you're going to have to deal with me at the board for a while. But the panel of advisors, an intimidating crew, to be sure. This was a group of folks who know this work, and I've had very few opportunities so complete with learning. I learned so much from Donald, from Elias, from Felicia, from Mr. Ferrante, from Marcel, from all of you. It was really incredible and just a real pleasure and an honor to be able to work with y'all. Again, the commitment, the zeal, the enthusiasm for this work was amazing. These are all really busy people who just kept coming. Kashia Powell, on late Zooms in DC on Friday evenings, because we were, running late on Friday afternoon. Just amazing. That commitment was really something to behold, and I'm very grateful. And the city of Los Angeles owes you all a real gratitude for your service on this committee. So I thank all of you on behalf of, I can't thank y'all on behalf of the Board of Public Works anymore, but I thank you personally for everything y'all did. And then lastly, I just want to say this. This work was crucial on myriad levels. We needed to understand what happened, and that took a lot of work. It's not immediately apparent, and that will still be evolving, and that's acknowledged in the report. I will say personally, though, that I think perhaps the most important thing is this. The Hyperion Water Reclamation Plant on July 10th was one of the most important pieces of infrastructure in the Western United States. Period, end of story. This is a colossus, the size of Disneyland. And it is 365, 7 days a year, 7 days a week, 24/7. We can't afford for it not to work. It was of vital importance on July 10th. We have now, as a city and as a region, doubled down. We're going to make this a complete water recycling facility by 2035. The commitment of the mayor, the commitment of the council, the commitment of everyone on here to do that. So the stakes are through the roof. It will represent 30% of our water resilience, hypothetically down the road. And simply put, we can't afford for it not to be the most resilient piece of infrastructure in the city of Los Angeles. The stakes are that high. It is an incredible opportunity, but it is an incredible challenge. And so, at the risk of being presumptuous, what I would say on behalf of myself and Commissioner Villegas to the full board, and on behalf of the committee of advisors, and everybody can speak for themselves, but this is not a report for the shelf. These recommendations mean something. They are not platitudes. They are not random wishes. They matter. And to the degree that I can influence this at all, I would just urge everybody in the city family and everybody in the city to commit to really recognizing and maintaining laser beam focus on the stakes of this facility, and to make sure that we all push very hard to make sure that this facility is everything it can be and everything it should be, because we can't afford not to. So please, all of us, don't let this report languish on the shelf. Let's get down to work, and let's get things done, because it matters. It matters to the resilience and the future of the city of Los Angeles and the region of Southern California. So with that, thank you all for being indulgent. Thank you all for the incredible work. And now to the maestro, Dr. Mike Stenstrom, unless Teresa, you're up next. You go.
No, I'm just going to turn it over to Professor Stenstrom. Go ahead, take it away, Mr. Stenstrom. You're muted. No, 2022.
Okay, I've got it. Okay, I assume everybody can hear me, and what you should be seeing is the cover page of our report, which is available to you or has been made available to you. Commissioner Villegas gave an excellent introduction to the members of the committee. I'd like to point out that there's a lot of experience on this committee, and some of it unique to Hyperion. There are senior members of the NGOs that are intimately familiar with the environment around Hyperion and the ocean. Additionally, we have folks that are experienced with Hyperion. Felicia Marcus was a member of the Board of Public Works during the reconstruction of Hyperion and has a wealth of other experience. Gary Lee Moore is the city engineer whose tenure included the reconstruction of Hyperion. Marcel Anaya is a lead operator at Hyperion and was very helpful in getting us to understand the events. Robert Friante is the manager of an agency that has a treatment plant the size of Hyperion and other treatment plants, and brought that kind of experience to the committee. Keisha Powell manages the DC Water Agency, and they have a plant that's larger than Hyperion. And Don Smith, who has a variety of experience, including being a former manager of Hyperion. So we had a variety of experiences. And I first visited Hyperion Treatment Plant in 1978 when I came to Los Angeles. So this is the executive summary of the report. It describes the event and some of the timing, relies upon CDM Smith's and Brown and Caldwell's preliminary reports. I'm cautioned to say preliminary with these reports because they're still under review, but I believe they're something like 95% complete. These reports were very helpful in ferreting out information about the event. So our summary defines the role of CDM Smith and Brown and Caldwell, what they did. And I want to especially point out that Brown and Caldwell found new sewer surveillance technology that was very helpful. It's important to note that some of the sewers go under the LAX runways. They're more than a mile from an access hole, and they've probably never been inspected in the last 70 years. So they found the technology to do that, involving a floating buoy and some other things that the appendix of the report describes that. CDM Smith's preliminary conclusions on electrical issues and needs for improvement are outlined. There was no smoking gun there, but one of the problems that they identified was the fact that the distributed control system had not been completed and that alarms needed to be better enunciated. Brown and Caldwell's report showed little evidence for a surge of debris that clogged the screens. That was the initial thought based upon the observable volume of debris and screenings. They found some issues that needed repair or cleaning, and those looked terrifying to those not familiar with sewers, but I can say I thought that the sewers were in pretty good shape compared to others that I have seen. Our report states that the likely cause of the event is the failure of chopper pumps and choppers, which are designed to get the debris out of the screens and into trucks for a haul-off. And we think that's where the main failure occurred, and there were other related things caused by that. The report notes that there was a delayed acknowledgement of a high-level alarm, and that a barrier was not removed until the early next morning. Had that alarm been acknowledged and the barrier removed, then the flood damage would have been less. However, we note that the alarm was not enunciated in a fashion that probably would be typical for such an alarm, such as a siren or flashing lights or a horn. The report notes that the Los Angeles Department of Health delayed in closing beaches, and I'm a little less familiar with that, but some of the folks from the NGOs may be able to answer questions if we have any. The report recommends some redesign to avoid debris recycling and development of a protocol between the Bureau of Sanitation and the LA Department of Public Health. Some of our advisors note that there was a protocol for beach closures, an early protocol, so it may be that we need that restored. But those are two of the key advisings. The report is divided up into sections, describes our role, and then in order to clearly describe the problems and the recommendations, it's divided into 7 sections. The first one is capital improvements, which I was most involved with, and the conveyance system, all the way down to emergency responses and how that can be improved. And finally, there are some conclusions in the report. So at this point, I'm going to explain how the event happened, or we think it happened, and what we need to do to avoid the event in the future. And I would also point out that this analysis and research into the operation of Hyperion has revealed some issues that need longer-term resolution for the best operation of Hyperion. And I think some of these issues have been there for a while, but they're not easy to fix, but we're recommending that they be fixed. What you see here is a simplified diagram of Hyperion that's in the form of a hydraulic profile. Hydraulic profiles are key to design of treatment plants, and they describe the way the water flows. My father, who was also a professor, said, to be a plumber, you need to know 2 things, hot on the left and water flows downhill. So Hyperion is fed by gravity, which is a good thing because it saves energy. But the difficulty is that there's no way to turn off the flow. There's no valve. And so the influent wastewater enters the bar screen building, and I'll explain bar screens, and then it flows to grit chambers, and then to primary clarifiers. And the primary clarifiers are the oldest part of the plant. I mean, a lot of it's been reconstructed. But primary treatment is just that. It's the first treatment. Also in time. Usually it's the first treatment that's been designed and constructed. From there, it is pumped uphill to the secondary plant, which was largely rebuilt in the 1990s and is a high purity oxygen treatment plant. And from that plant, it goes out to the 5 mile outfall. There are some processes between the two to produce reclaimed water for use in the plant, but I'm not showing those. The red arrows show potential places for flooding. And you can see the one near the bar screens, which is the one that happened. But our report recommends a thorough study of flow and flood risk for the plant. And the arrows that, the other two arrows are places where there's significant risk. So this is a schematic of how bar screens work in the channel. And it's simplified. There are 8 parallel bar screens in the Hyperion building, 4 fine screens at 3/8 inch opening, 3/8 inch opening, and 4 with 3/4 inch openings. And what happens in the screening area is the water flows in, and you can see that there are barriers and sluice gates, but normally those are up during operation. And the water flows to the screens and through the screen and then out into the other parts of the plant. Now you'll notice that there's a small difference in water level in the screen. And that's caused by the fact that there's some head loss through the screen. And the screens have some type of rake or moving rake to transport the screenings up to the top and for disposal. Hyperion has a sluice for disposal, which drops the screenings into a sluice containing water flowing that then moves to further removal processes. So that's the way it works. And the rake or the transport mechanism can be automated or it can be manual. There's lots of options for that. The Hyperion screen was automated. And I want to say something about the barrier and the sluices. So screenings are high maintenance items because there's corrosion and there's buildup of material. And so you need to be able to take them out of service to isolate them. So I'm very familiar with treatment plant design, and everything you have in a treatment plant has to be maintained. So it has to be designed in such a way that you can maintain it. So the 2 motor-operated sluices that you see here, sluice gates, can be lifted to allow water to flow through, or they can be dropped down to isolate it so that maintenance workers can get to the screens. And so these have to be exercised periodically because of corrosion and so forth. And the report shows that they were exercised monthly. Because oftentimes gate valves like that fail when you try to open them because of corrosion. There are other things here, the barriers, and sometimes they're called stop logs. And what they are designed to do is to restrict flow, but they're used when you don't have to use them very often. They would be like yearly maintenance or 5-year maintenance oftentimes. And they're dropped in manually, and they have to be lifted by a crane. And you can see the lifting eyes here are below the surface of the building. We'll see that in some pictures. And that's a significant thing in this event. So what the CDM report notes is that these screens were working. They tripped out, meaning that they were overloaded. But they were overloaded not because of electrical failures, but because of excessive debris, which overloaded the motors. So here's a picture of how screens work. I use this in my lectures. I just included it here because I thought it was a good way of describing how they work. This shows a rake that moves up and down, and that was typical of the older screens. The screens that we have now at Hyperion were replaced in 2019 for good reason. They needed to be finer, and we wanted improved, or Hyperion wanted improved odor control. And so the rake runs periodically, or the transport mechanism runs periodically, moves all of the debris to the top where it can be disposed. And you see there's some minor bit of head loss here. It's about 4 inches normally for the Hyperion screens. The debris that is removed is all manner of things, anything that can be flushed down a toilet, and in many cases stuff that flows into sewers, sometimes illegally, sometimes legally. It can include lumber, all sorts of things. If you go to treatment plants, you'll often see a collection of unusually looking bicycles, all different kinds. And that's because bicycles come down the sewers and wind up on the screens and recovered and recycled by operators. So there's some benefit of the screenings. So on the right, you see a picture of the Hyperion screens. They're at an angle, and they're covered with plexiglass for odor control. And that's an important addition to the modifications in 2019. The covering does obscure the screens a little bit. It's a little hard to look through them. And one of our recommendations is that the BOS install video monitoring equipment so that these can be observed from other places. So this is a schematic of how the whole system works. I've simplified it as much as possible. What you see in this horizontal line is the flow in the sluice. I'll show you a picture of the sluice on the next slide. But it's about 1.4 million gallons per day. That's about 1,000 gallons per minute. And the screenings drop into it, and the flow moves down. And normally the flow would go down the suction to these chopper pumps. Flows down. The chopper pumps are pumps that have special blades on the front end that shear up material, shear up the rags, the strings, and so forth, and reduce the size of the screening so that they can flow through the pump and through the piping. From there, it flows up to the top of the headworks building, where it is dewatered with drum screens. And I'll show you some pictures of that. The dewatering is sort of a physical process to squeeze out the water. The water is recycled back to the front of the bar screens. And designers take great caution in trying to minimize the human interaction that's needed here. So the screenings fall by gravity into trucks where they can be hauled off to the landfill. Now, one of the things I learned is that this system here, according to the operators, has always been a little bit problematic, needing more maintenance. And it's not surprising when you have long suction lines. And so there was a second method of removing screenings from the plant that was installed later. And we'll see pictures of that, but they have a different kind of chopper, and then spiral lifts that drop the material into the same trucks. So what we think is that this failed, and the screenings couldn't get out of the plant, and they went through this overflow back to the head of the screens and overloaded them because there was no screenings removal. They just accumulated over time. So here you see pictures of the actual building. This is the sluice over on the left, top left, and it's under normal operation. You can see there's liquid flow with debris in it, and it flows towards the chopper pump intakes, which are away from us looking into the picture. The picture in the middle on the top is the sluice, and you can see the three downcomers leading down to the chopper pumps. So the liquid flow with the debris would go down these three pipes, and here are two chopper pumps. You're seeing the discharge piping, these two pipes here that go up to the top where there are drum screens. And on the lower left, you see drum screens that are designed to dewater the material so that the water content is reduced so that it can be taken to a landfill. And here's a close-up of what these drum screens look like. And so here is the other method that was added. And you can see this large motor is running a chopper. Sometimes one manufacturer calls them muffing monsters, but there are devices that cut up the debris. And you see there's an operator there that's helping feed the material into the chopper. One thing that I learned is that if one of these pumps goes out and needs to be rebuilt, both pumps have to be turned off because there's not isolation. Marcel can comment on that if we need more information. And from there, it goes into this compactor and up these pipes here that you see, which are called spiral lifts. And it moves up and drops into the truck that's behind. And so when the truck fills up, it can be taken to a landfill. It is common to landfill grit and screenings. What you see on the right is the overflow. And this is where the recycling occurred. You can see there's a weir here that's adjustable. It's in the lowest position here. So the liquid would flow into those other choppers. The three downcomers are to the left. And if the liquid cannot be transported out, the liquid would rise up and overflow this weir and go back to the front, in front of the screens. That's necessary because there's sufficient flow here to create its own spill if there was no way of handling the recycle. Unfortunately, we think that this was the way screenings were transported back to the front of the screens. These are all my pictures, but now you see pictures from the Bureau of Sanitation. They kindly provided pictures to us. On the left, you see the bar screens near the peak of the flooding incident. And you can see the water pooled up at the bottom. It's important to know that the pooling water created hazards, tripping hazards. There's openings that may or may not be open. You can't see to walk. And there's also electrocution possibilities when the water is this deep. So when the water became this deep, it was really not easy or possible for the operators to get back in and do things differently. So in the middle, you see what was done to alleviate the recycling of screenings. The back of the bar screens were opened up and the screenings were allowed to pile out onto the floor. And you can see there's one here in the foreground, there's one in the background, and I believe in this picture there's another one in the foreground that's not included. The water backed up, came up over the floor, flowed down into the bottom of this building and out the door. You can see the light at the end, which is close to the door. So it flowed out the door into the outdoor areas and down the road into other parts of the plant. Hyperion is a well-designed plant with underground tunnels to house the equipment and create reliable transfer. But unfortunately, a lot of that was flooded by this excessive water. And you can see on the right some of the equipment that was flooded. The flooding destroyed a lot of the pumps and the electrical equipment, which is in a plant the size of Hyperion is often unique equipment. You don't buy it off the shelf at Granger's. You order it and maybe they say we can give it to you in a month or whatever. I know the Bureau of Sanitation went to great lengths to acquire equipment quickly, rebuilding, rewinding motors and so forth. On the bottom picture you see where some of the floodwaters went into a new construction project. And I note that some vehicles were destroyed because water got into parking areas and flooded vehicles. So here's some of the recommendations that we've made, and some are short-term and some are long-term. And I would like to note that Hyperion staff has already implemented some of the short-term recommendations in their own issues to avoid a recurrence of this flood. But one of the things I said in the first meetings was that when systems fail, they need to fail gracefully. And so if screens fail, failing gracefully is not creating a flood. So we're recommending a high-level bypass to the grit chamber. And so this would just bypass the screens, and I think there's ample room to do that. It will require a redesign and some construction and some funding. But what this would do is, in the event of a future failure, would direct a great deal of the influent around the screens and avoid flooding. It could also reroute floodwaters by gravity flow to emergency storage. Hyperion has some emergency storage that's left over from the old secondary plant, and that could be plumbed up. And the key thing here is that this would operate in the event of an emergency without specific operator interaction. The water would rise up and flow in a safe direction. There was a lot of damage to equipment because of flooding, and some of it was just electrical damage, and some of it was pressure on walls and doors that forced them to break. And so we're recommending that submarine doors be constructed in key areas, and securing entrances to the tunnels. The tunnels need to be accessible by operators and by equipment, because some of the motors that are in the tunnels weigh 1,000 pounds, and so there have to be A-frames and cranes to get in and out. So you can't just bolt up the accesses to the tunnels. You have to do it in a clever way that would prevent water from entering, but also allow them to be used for all of the maintenance and operating need. And we think that this method of transporting screenings out of the plant should be redesigned in such a way to prevent recycling. I know from my experience at other treatment plants that there's different ways of doing that. So there's some opportunities there. Another issue that I think would be really important is for the distributed control system to log motor currents on the screens. There's a motor, 5 horsepower, at the top of the screen, and when the load on the screen increases, the motor current increases. And it increased so much during the flood event that the motors tripped out. The protective circuitry to keep the motors from overloading and burning turned them off. And so closed circuit television to monitor the screens. There's also a suggestion that on the coarse screens that the motor sizes be increased. I should note that early in this process I contacted my friends at different treatment plants and different consulting firms, and I confirmed that the type of equipment that Hyperion acquired, Headworks International equipment, the screens, are considered a good screen. We did not purchase cheap screens when the screens were rebuilt. So in the conveyance system, the problems found by Brown and Caldwell in their initial reports need to be repaired. That might include some repair of liners. There's a lot of accumulation of debris, heavy debris that's at the bottom in the Headworks building. That's typically called grit by sanitary engineers. And there's a maintenance program that needs to be implemented for that. It's not possible, it's probably not possible for this debris to have been observed previously, because it's a difficult place to get to. The appendix of our report shows some pictures of equipment that allowed this to be detected. And so item 4 here is communicate finding to other agencies. We should note that across the United States, especially in the West, there is a reduction in sewer flow rates, but there's no reduction in the mass of pollutants in the sewers. All of the conservation devices that we're using, such as low flush toilets and low flow shower heads, tends to reduce the flow, but the magnitude of the pollutants does not decrease. And so all of the agencies are finding this to be a problem. And one of the problems is that the sewers, which were designed for high flow, are now experiencing low flow, which allows solids to accumulate. In areas with combined sewers, where stormwater and sanitary waste are combined, you get big surges of solids when you have a rainstorm. We're fortunate that we have separate sewers, but we still need to anticipate accumulation in the sewers. And it's a national problem, and we think this experience at Hyperion would be worthwhile to share with other agencies and for the folks at Hyperion to learn from other agencies. Assessments and audits, ranking the alarms. Don Smith pointed out that alarms have different importance, and a high-level alarm is something that requires an immediate response, and there wasn't ranking, at least that we could tell. The other issue is a longer-term issue, and Hyperion has as much as 800 MGD storm flow during a rainfall. It's a separate sewer system, but there's enough infiltration to create peak flows. We actually don't know what the peak flow is. I use the number 800 because that's the number I learned when I was doing a project at Hyperion in about 2010. The average flow now is about 260 MGD. So we don't know what that maximum flow could be. And we think an engineering study and perhaps some redesign needs to be performed in order for the plant to reliably handle this peak flow. Recall that Hyperion is gravity fed, so there's no valve to turn off the flow. So the conveyance system needs to be studied. Some municipalities have found ways of providing storage in the conveyance system. Review needs for emergency power. Every treatment plant has to have emergency power. Hyperion has two sources, but what we're suggesting is that the power out to the various parts of the plant needs to be reviewed and perhaps changed. And the distributed control system needs to be reviewed. That's a very important thing, so it allows the operators in the control room to see what's happening everywhere in the plant. And I think CDM implicated the distributed control system as one of the causes of the poor response to the flood, because not all of the information that would have helped the operators was available. And it was noted that the way of telling the public about the spill and the impact on the beaches needed to be improved. And so we're recommending that as well. Operation and procedures in the headworks. The headworks is a nasty place to work. I just showed it to you. And so a lot of times you have problems at headworks at different treatment plants. It's not a Hyperion problem. It's a treatment plant problem everywhere. Evaluate responsibilities of staff on duty to operate and maintain headworks. There needs to be backup staff. Evaluate the enunciating and its responses to alarms. So some alarms need to be printed out on a computer. Some need to turn on a siren. And oftentimes plants have, and this applies to plants beyond treatment plants, have had problems because there's so many alarms going off at once that nobody can tell what to do. So we don't want that extreme situation, but this is an important thing for the operations to do. Develop new operating procedures to identify best practice for removing the barriers. Barriers are normally not installed in anticipation of emergency operation. They take time to remove, and in the normal operation, the barriers should not be in place. Evaluate and develop revised procedures for appropriate backup of screens, choppers, and spiral lifts. I noted that the choppers are high maintenance items, and the CDM report identifies that some of the equipment was out of service and needing repair prior to the flood event, and sometimes it's difficult to repair these things. It takes time. Identify and implement improvements of documentation to ensure that all shifts practice the same procedures, communicate with others. Hyperion's a big plant, a lot of different shifts, and we think that's something that could be improved. Develop and or update to make sure new operators are trained for this critical function, and create a standard inspection round for all shifts. One thing that CDM noted is that the various operators on different shifts had different ways of recording information, and some was better than others, and so that could be standardized and improved. Evaluate and conduct reviews quarterly or other frequency as appropriate of the logs to identify the potential problems. An independent party within the plant needs to look at the logs and recommend changes or improvements. Evaluate and develop as appropriate a specific plan of action with appropriate training for a future bar screen failure. So these 3 red arrows for floods are high-risk areas, and if there's a failure there, there probably needs to be a specific type of action taken that everybody in the plant needs to know about. Training, ensure backup of operators and cross-trained. Trained to recognize and respond to emergency alarms, which is related to what I just said. Trained to coordinate system operation with DCT and Glendale treatment plants. The LA system can operate with the 3 plants in a collaborative fashion, and LA County does that, and you would expect them to do it well because they have a number of plants. But one thing that could happen in such an event in the future is that the Donald Tillman plant and the Glendale plants could increase flow rates to the maximum possible in such an event. And there is some coordination already going on, and Hai-Sang Kim noted that when he saw the failure, one of the things he did was to contact DCT to see if they were doing anything that might affect Hyperion. But that sort of management as a system could help. And staffing, evaluate and update critical staffing needs. We were told that there's a chronic shortage of staffing in unfilled positions, exacerbated by COVID, but also a problem in ordinary times. And evaluate the needs for normal hours, evening hours, holiday hours, and forecasts of large rain events. We don't get that much rain here, unfortunately, but in places where there is a lot of rain, they have like a fire drill for rain events that are predicted. And because of the changes in climate and the fact that the sewers are going to probably accumulate more solids, we probably need to have such a drill at Hyperion and other plants. And determine what call-in staff are needed. And the headworks is one of the least desirable locations to work, and I think you can see that from my pictures. So establish an incentive to work at the headworks. Maybe an off-shift increase. Adopt policies, protocols, and training to promote better intra- and interagency responses. And this relates to talking to public health and other agencies that needed to know, such as the NGOs and the folks concerned with beach closures. A protocol to initiate additional water quality sampling. The water quality is routinely sampled by various agencies for indicator organisms, but in the event of a spill like this, it would probably make sense to initiate additional water quality sampling. And you have to do that sort of on an automatic way. You can't spend time deciding whether to do it or not because you will miss the peaks. And another recommendation is to look at modeling techniques to predict what type of spill will affect beach water quality. In that way, the operators at the plant would be able to say, this is a small spill, it's not going to have a big impact, here's who we need to notify, and here's a big spill that's going to have a big impact. Hopefully there won't be spills in the future, but you know, you hope for the best and plan for the worst. So that completes the PowerPoint presentation of the things that the advisors have recommended. We're also recommending the possibility of a bypass or a diversion, because Hyperion has a 5-mile outfall and a 1-mile outfall. And one of the appendices of our report discusses a hypothetical situation that if the equipment had been available, it's not available at present, but if it had been available to get all of the floodwaters into the 5-mile outfall, it would have protected the plant and reduced overall the pollution delivered to the ocean. Such a bypass would have reduced the pollutant load on the ocean by about 99%. Okay, so that's it. I'm ready for questions or additional comments from other advisors.
Thank you, Professor Stenstrom. I'm actually going to allow any of the advisors some time to speak or share any other thoughts that went into the report at this time. So if you can just either raise your hand or just so that we can call on you. I know that we don't have all of them, but we have some of them here. If any of you wanted to provide any comments, any additional context, please do so. And Professor Stenstrom, I think you can stop sharing. Do we see any raised hands, Fernando, or TJ, Dr. Campos?
No hands raised at this time. Again, if you are part of the advisory team, if you can raise your hand if you'd like to provide any commentary.
Well, this is unusual. They've always been talking at our previous meetings.
So much to say. Now we're on the spotlight and everybody is mum.
You did a great job, doctor. That's what that is.
Oh, well, thank you.
Yeah, took a complicated subject matter and really interpret it in a way that we could all understand it. I appreciate all the illustrations as well. All right, so seeing no raised hands, why don't we, I think I'm going to turn this back over to President Garcia, just so we can do questions by the commissioners.
Great. Thank you, Commissioner Villegas, and thank you also to former President Good, and to Mr. Dr. Sternstrom and everybody else that participated in making this report and today's presentation available to us, and for all the work that everybody took to make this happen. And this really is a testament of how important this was to us as the Board of Public Works. And so we thank you for that. We really do thank you to make sure that we were able to see an independent assessment of what happened during July 11th event. I'm going to turn it over to questions for my colleagues. So I'll start with Commissioner Davis. Dr. Davis, any questions?
Yes. Well, first, I'd like to once again, thank Dr. Stenstrom for giving us the details of the assessment in this research as to our problem of what occurred. Is this complex or is it complicated? And in many ways, I think it was definitely complex, which means that there are many of the answers that we probably did not know then. And I don't know moving forward if we have all of the answers moving forward in terms of confronting this problem again. In your report, Doctor, you mentioned several things. The first one I want to talk about that is of a concern to me is this issue of low flow. We have, from our concern about the environment, recommended low flow. And you have suggested the impact of that decision in terms of what outcome potentially occurs with low flow in this system. What is the recommendation, and I apologize if I missed it, what is the recommendation as we grapple with our consistent embracing of low flow in this system?
Okay, well, first of all, I think the conservation and efforts that create low flow are good, and we want to accommodate the low flow in the future and not try to avoid it. The second thing is that there are plants that have combined sewer flows, meaning the storm flow and the sanitary flow are in the same sewer. And they have experience where the rain comes and they get a lot of material coming into the headworks of the plant. And so they have to beef up and sort of change the sizes of some of the material coming into the plant. Brown and Caldwell, one of the consultants, has a lot of experience in that. There are other consultants. I think the Bureau of Sanitation and the Bureau of Engineering need to get together with them and look at a long-term issue here. Sometimes, like the city of Milwaukee had problems with this for a long time. And what they would do in dry periods is that they would put an inflatable dam in the sewer and back up the water and then deflate so that they got this surge coming in. And that was done little by little across the system. They subsequently constructed a lot of infrastructure to avoid that. But there are things that can be done. We need to be proactive. And I did mention that this is not just a Hyperion problem. This is a national problem. And
Sure.
so I think it's really important to report Hyperion's experiences and to learn from others' experiences. And the Water Environment Federation meeting, which is always in October, is a great place for that.
Sure. So you agree that this issue of low flow is a phenomenon that we need to embrace in terms of problem-solving techniques moving forward?
Yes, I do.
Okay. The other issue you raised earlier in your initial statement about the problem, you mentioned something about choppers. Could you elaborate a little bit further so I can be a little much more clearer on the impact of choppers and what you were saying?
So the screening material can be plastic. A lot of pill bottles come and so forth. And it's difficult to get those out of the system. They clog up pipes, and you know, all manner of things come down sewers. And you'd be surprised what comes down the sewers. So what the choppers do is they break up plastics and they cut these long strings. The fibers in wastewater will wind together to create long strings, and those will clog equipment. So what the choppers do is they break them up. And I can show you pictures of choppers, and when I show the chopper, I always put my hands in my pocket because I'm afraid of my fingers, because they look like some devil's incarnate type of things for cutting stuff up. But they wear because they're cutting. And so choppers are something we have to live with, and they are going to require frequent maintenance. And I believe that the headworks at Hyperion can be redesigned with less reliability, with less need for choppers, although they will need some choppers.
Great. That's great to know. The other issue you raised was certainly an issue of concern and focus, which was the alarms, the ignoring the alarms. What impact did our reaction to alarms have? And is our culture in the organization that you have observed in the research such that it is unclear about our response to the degrees in which the alarms should be responded to, if you will?
Yeah, well, that's a very important, essential question. And you know, I've been to 250 different treatment plants, and I know operators. I'm sympathetic to operators. They have a difficult but important job. And somehow, some way, this high-level alarm was not recognized or responded to. And had it been recognized and responded to early, some of the damage, maybe all of the damage, I don't know, we're talking about hypotheticals here, could have been avoided. Certainly the barrier could have been removed earlier, but the alarm, as near as I know from the CDM report, appeared as a line in a printout, and it should have been going off in flashing lights. It's like a serious alarm versus some other alarm that is not so serious. I will note that on my second visit to the headworks, the Bureau of Sanitation had already installed a second level control with alarm. So they're very aware of that and have already acted upon it. But that's part of what needs to happen with a distributed control system, is that these different alarms need to be enunciated better. And we did mention some other things like current on the motors for the bar screens. If the bar screens were starting to be overloaded, the current on the motors would increase. That can be very easily alarmed with electrical equipment and would be another indication that a problem is occurring.
I would suspect that your recommendations in the research came up with some ideas about what we should be paying attention to as it relates to alarms, and perhaps some recommendations on how we can better respond to these degrees of alarms that you have mentioned. My question to you is, does your recommendation deal with the fact, as we approach alarms in our system, that should there be duplicative notification of alarms than just in one system on site? Should there be some kind of impact notification of the alarm in multiple places within the system?
Well, yes, you're right about that. Hyperion has a main control room, and if you go in that control room, you think you're on the Starship Enterprise, because there's all of these screens and so forth, and lots of equipment. And so I can imagine it would be easy to not observe something. I mean, we hear about pilots not observing an alarm in the cockpit because it's so complicated. There is a culture among emergency preparedness people of ranking alarms so that the operators recognize the critical alarm, the one that has to be responded to very quickly, and the not so critical alarm. You know, we could go back to 3 Mile Island, and part of the problem at 3 Mile Island was that there were so many alarms nobody could tell what was really going on. And we don't want that to happen at Hyperion. But I think monitoring the current and televising the screens, because I imagine something like when you go into a building with security, you see the receptionist is looking at some screens with maybe 9 little windows in it, and he sees the back door and the front door and the elevator and so forth. And I think we need that for the bar screens at Hyperion.
Is it realistic to expect that the notification about alarms can be placed in more than one place? For example, could it be at the site, and then could it be also duplicative in terms of being notified at another location? That will be a check and a balance. I don't hear a check and a balance as it relates to alarms. Is that a reasonable approach?
Yes, that can be easily done. It's electronic. And so our recommendation is that it would alarm in the screenings building, because the screenings building doesn't have a complicated control room, but there are places where the operators sit between inspections. And it can be alarmed there, it can be alarmed in the main room, and it could be sent to the management in downtown LA.
Great.
There's possibilities of doing that. I mean, the technology.
So we currently, in the current system, we are not currently doing it, Doctor?
Not
Correct.
that I'm aware of. I don't think we reported outside of the Hyperion main control room. Hi-Sang Kim is here.
This would be a recommendation from your research that we consider such an objective moving forward?
Yes, well, I think our recommendation is that the alarms and their importance and the level of alarms should be thoroughly studied, and the remote alarming and local alarming and extra signals such as the current and the television should all be put together. And there are companies that do that. I think that the consultants in the Bureau of Sanitation are competent to do that. But yes, that's a very important outcome of this, and I think you're absolutely right for questioning that. Maybe we should highlight that more in our recommendations, but
Okay, and one other thing, Doctor, screenings. You talked about screenings. Could you elaborate in terms of the impact of overloaded debris on the screenings and what impact it has?
okay, well that's another good question, because normally the screens and they're about this thick, and I might pull up a picture here and show you, but normally when the material gets on the screen, it's just held there by the force of the water, and the rake can pick it up and take it off. Now what we think happened at Hyperion, because the water had backed up and was above the floor, when the operators put on the backup screens, there was 8 feet of head across the screens instead of 4 inches. And so whatever accumulated screenings rushed into the screen, got between the bars, and couldn't be removed. That was an abnormal situation. I don't think any screening system could have handled that. But I believe that's what happened, and why the additional screens blinded so quickly. My best understanding of the screens is that they worked about as well as we could expect, although there was probably some other options that could have been exercised had the distributed control system been completed.
Okay. Well, that's pretty much the areas of concern that I have for the research that you have shared with us. And once again, I want to thank you for describing what I feel was a very complex situation that we had to confront. And I think that your recommendations, coupled with some of the additional measures that the department, the Bureau, has already implemented in terms of new technology, I think collectively both your research findings and the new things that they have implemented to upgrade our system technologically will help us be better prepared as we confront some of the issues in the operation of the plan in the future. So again, Dr. Stenstrom, thank you so very much for your research, and most of all, thank you for your findings and your recommendations.
Well, you're very welcome. You know, I'm a ratepayer. I live in Los Angeles,
Yes.
so I have a second
You have an
interest in
invested
making
yes,
Hyperion work well.
You are. We thank you. We thank you so much for this. And you've really shared light in terms of some of the recommendations that we discussed. So thank you.
Agreed. Thank you, Dr. Davis, for your line of questioning. Commissioner Calosa, any questions?
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you for your presentation, Dr. Stenstrom, and thank you to all the committee members, Commissioner Villegas, former President Good, for all your work on this. I do have follow-up questions, and also just wanted to understand, and I'm still going through the report myself. You know, I know it was just made available, so I haven't, I'm still going through all the 53 pages of the report. Super technical, and, you know, really appreciate the amount of time and effort you all took to explain it, also in plain language to people who aren't super familiar with a treatment plant. And so appreciate all the photos and illustrations as well. I think you did a really great job, Dr. Stenstrom, of breaking it down for us about how it works, especially for the things below the surface that we cannot see, and how it flows through the entire plant. I guess one of the questions, and I don't know if it's really best for you, Dr. Stenstrom, or maybe it's for Barbara or somebody else, but just wanting to know, now that this report is out, it's made publicly available, how are we going to be communicating this to the public, to the community, to the impacted residents, who really want to know, like, what happened, and more importantly, what is it we're going to do moving forward that we can act on. So I'm not sure who's best equipped to answer that question, but that's one that I think is really important to answer today.
Yeah, I think that's a management decision for the Bureau of Sanitation and the Board of Public Works. So I would defer to Barbara Romero to be the first person answering that. And Tracy, Minamidi is on the call. She might also be helpful.
So I think we're in the process, thank you, Commissioner Caloza. We're in the process of developing an action plan. And with that, there's going to be different categories very aligned with the recommendations from the ad hoc group that will include, some of it is going to be developing, additional notification protocols. And so we are going to have to involve, not only this group to help us implement, which we are very gracious for their time and effort, but also getting the work out. And so that's how we're going to do it. The VR action plan is my initial response to your question.
Got it. And now, what's the process for getting that work out? Are we looking at something this year, or just so we can better gauge?
It's underway now. We're still, as Dr. Centrum indicated, there's still all the reports are being finalized. So the things that are urgent, we have already they're underway. So they've started. So as soon as we get resources in the next budget, we're also asking for additional resources for some of the work. So we are applying a lot of the lessons learned, and we're gonna also in the same format of short, medium, and long term. And obviously, some of the work that is inevitable that we are doing now is going to be coming to you guys for additional notifications. And so we'll have a process through the Board of Public Works. Is going to be one of our vehicles.
Got it. And from these findings, the recommendations from the advisory group, which of these have been implemented already by LA SAN? If you can just briefly explain, either you or Tracy, might be helpful for us to understand which ones have moved forward already. It sounds like some of them have already been adopted, while some of them, as you just mentioned, require additional funding to actually implement, probably the ones involving the capital improvements and I'm sure staffing.
So I'll give you the large, we've modernized some of, we're going to some of our notification systems, for example, is a simple one, where we already have a group text with all the different relevant public agencies so that we can, be more responsive. That's a basic one that is really easy. We're upgrading our, our protocols as they relate to just some of the emergency response. And then we've also, some of our procedures have been revised to address the high water levels. And then, some of the upgrades, as, Dr. Centrum indicated, are, as it relates to the alarms. And we've also even just shut down some holes in walls, and the way I would describe it is, we're addressing the things that are immediate response, and then those that need more study, we're looking at getting consultants to help assist us with that. And then some of them, through the budget process, and as they address is training and resources, and filling positions will be the other category. But we can, we're going to look at what we're doing is aligning we're going to continue to evaluate as we just received this final report as well, and integrate it into our action plan.
Okay, so you just received the report as well. Sorry.
Yes.
Okay.
We've been working, with them we've been participating in the process, but we're looking at it from applying the lessons learned, and as this work and this investigation was happening, we're also doing our own and looking at our own house and knowing what things we needed to address. We've also, for example, we have to develop some emergency response. We actually did one last fall that, you weren't able to attend. That was, from lessons learned, getting all the multiple agencies from inside the city and external partners to help us, address how do we improve our notification process, how do we get them to understand our operating procedures and what things we need to moving forward. As part, one of the things we were responding, but it's important to communicate how we're responding so that people understand, quickly what we're doing. Because I think that was one of the, things that we need to improve, and that was, we don't need resources, is we just needed to organize ourselves with internally and externally. And thanks to EMD, Carol Parks' team helped us put that together.
Ms. Mita, did you want to add something?
Just to elaborate a little bit on what Barbara was saying, we do have some projects that are currently underway right now. One of them specifically is to deal with removing all of the settled debris that is inside our outfall sewers as well as in the headworks channels. So that's something we have already had some analysis done on that, and we're bringing on board a contractor within the next few weeks. We'll be coming to the board for approval of an emergency use of a contractor for that. We've also initiated a project for the distributed control system, which is what Dr. Stenstrom was talking about. We need to add some additional features that will be in our control room for alarming systems and providing that. So that project is underway. And we also initiated a project, again, as was recommended here in the report, to reroute some of the flows that are going in our storm drain system internal to the plant that end up at the headworks. We're going to be rerouting those flows so they won't be going to the headworks. They'll be going downstream to our aerated grid chambers. So this, again, was one of the recommendations that the advisory committee included in their report. So that's just a taste, but we have a long list under development as part of our action plan that we're working on. Many of the suggestions coming from within staff ourselves, as well as now looking more closely at the ad hoc report and our consultant support reports.
Thank you for adding Ms. Mita. And just curious, from July, from when this incident happened, obviously I know there's been a lot of emergency repairs at the plant. Where are we now with that? Are a lot of those concerns addressed? Have the repairs been made? And, what's the current status of Hyperion?
Yes, those repairs have been made. So we are currently functioning back in normal capacity. A lot of that challenge after the initial flood took us, some weeks to repair. But now we are in steady state mode.
Okay. Thank you for confirming. Look forward to seeing the action plan that LACN is putting together. Really hoping that we can put together and highly recommend and advise LACN to put together a condensed version of something that we can share with the public about what's going to be happening next. This report's really important. To look at the details and all the technical aspects about what happened and some recommendations. But I think that the average person, the impacted residents, they just want to know how it's not going to happen again and what we can do better. So having a condensed version for the public, I think, would be incredibly helpful in your action plan. And how do we communicate with the residents of this district, of course, the residents of El Segundo, and thank you, Mr. The Public Works Director for being here, are for me some of the critical items that I really want us to prioritize. And want to go back to some questions for Dr. Stenstrom. And I know you went over so many different potential action items. Or what do you think is the most immediate recommendation or policy area that the city really needs to prioritize as we head into this next phase of this action plan? I know there's a lot here in the report, and so figuring out what is top priority, I would love to hear your thoughts on that and anybody else from the committee.
Okay, well, as I said, a lot of things have been done already. I think one of the things that needed to change quickly and has changed is the policy of using the barriers. And I think Haiseng Kim has already told us in previous meetings how the barriers are not being used in the way they were before. And it could be that they want to maybe automate the way the barriers can be removed. Because I think that's one critical thing. You know, the plant had operated for 20 years or so without a flood in the headworks, and I think the operators just couldn't imagine the water coming up and flooding the headworks. But that's what happened. And when that started, it meant that they couldn't remove the barriers. So I think the very first thing that needs to be done, or has been done, is that the policy for being able to remove the barriers with the least alarm, the least significant alarm of water level. So I believe we can have Hang Sung or Tracy tell us, but I believe that has been done. The second thing is the level controls and the enunciation. If the water level alarm comes up above a certain value, then a siren needs to go off in the building, okay? Because that's something that has to have an immediate response. It's like putting on the brakes when you see the red taillights in front of you when you're on the freeway. And I think those are things that can be done or have been done without a lot of capital expenditures. I think another thing, and maybe I'm emphasizing this a bit more now, is it's a longer-term study. We need a longer-term study to understand peak flows into Hyperion. And I thank Don Smith for helping me understand that, because he's intimately familiar with the plant. So it's conceivable that we could have a big giant rainfall that's unusual because of, and we're getting things like this because of global warming. And that could create higher flow at Hyperion than we've ever anticipated before. And so we need a study to understand how that would be addressed. And I think there are things that we could do. One of the appendix of the report talks about a diversion to protect the plant and protect the environment. So those are things that that come to my mind, and I welcome the committee in adding anything. I should also mention the protocol with the Department of Health Services. There needs to be a way of communicating that doesn't require thinking ahead of time. It's sort of done automatically. And Mark Gold tells me that there used to be such a protocol, and maybe it's just resurrecting that protocol. But that's another really important one. And I think the way we notify the public can be improved. And I don't think it's really that difficult to change that. You know, some of these things require concrete and steel, and some just require that we act differently. So let's see if Haiseng wants to say anything, or if any of the other members of the committee want to say anything.
Sure. This is Hee-Sang Kim, Operations Manager at Hyperion. The use of barrier has been stopped immediately after the July 11 incident. We came up with revised standard operating procedure to use the bypass channel without the barrier, so it's out. And then we do routine practice or exercise of using the bypass channel with sluice gates without the barrier on a monthly basis. And then second thing that Dr. Stenstrom brought out is local alarms or visible and audible alarms. As Dr. Stenstrom, saw after July 11, I think second visit, it's there. And then to add one more thing that we are working on, as Tracy mentioned, the connecting these instruments and motor status to DCS is ongoing. Plus, we are also working on building or repurposing some of the unused channel for something called passive overflow, which just work on gravity without the use of any instruments or electrical motors. And these passive overflows will slow down the rate of water level rising, so that there's valuable extra time that operator can respond. And there are, like Tracy mentioned, whole lot of list of projects that we are working on. Some are near term, some are long term, but we are working on, in my description, lowest hanging fruits.
Thank you, Hisan. And Mr. Resnick, did you have your hand raised?
Yes, I'll just mention briefly, just to follow up a little bit. Bruce Resnick with LA Waterkeeper, a member of the committee, and you have a hard time keeping quiet for too long. It's probably surprising to everybody who knows me that I didn't jump in earlier, and it really was just the report, I think, speaks to itself, and Dr. Svensson's presentation. I just wanted to add, at the risk of just saying everything is a priority, because everything I think we listed is, as the technical folks kind of go to sort of the technical fixes, I would also just want to make sure that we emphasize some of the human infrastructure aspect as well, getting staffed up at the right levels, make sure those are filled, the incentives that Dr. Stenstrom spoke about, the training, I think are also really, really critical in addition to what's already been covered. So just wanted to throw that out there as well. Thanks.
Thank you, Mr. Resnick. Dr. Davis, you have your hand up.
Thank you, Commissioner Colosa. One of the remaining issues I forgot to address, and I don't know if Ms. Romero might be the appropriate person. I am also concerned about staffing and what impact it has on our operation moving forward. Where are we with staffing? What is the plan with staffing? And I guess first, does it have an impact upon what we are able to do in this operation there?
Thank you, Dr. Davis. Let me, I think let's finish with Commissioner Colosa's line of questioning, and then we'll make sure that we get an answer, because that is also one of my questions too. So thank you for that, Dr. Davis.
Okay, thank you, Chairman. Chairwoman.
Go ahead, Commissioner Colosa.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, Mr. Resnick, and everyone for chiming in. I have questions on staffing as well. It sounds like my colleagues are going to ask it as well, and I know want to give others an opportunity to ask questions. I'll ask one question, then I'll defer it to the rest of my colleagues. But in terms of staffing, I know there's part of the report talks about that there was a delay in understanding that the water started to flood headworks. And so can Dr. Stenstrom, can you speak a little bit about what you found with our staffing levels? What are the critical pieces there that we do need to pay attention to in terms of making sure that we make sure this never happens again? I know it was a little bit more vague in the report, but would want to really understand the details of what you found and what should be.
Yeah, well, I'll start with the staffing issue and then hand it off to somebody that's better acquainted. But I was told that there's always a problem having enough of the right people at the headworks. Somebody's out, somebody's positions are open. We talked in one of our meetings about how there could be a way of anticipating departures so that when somebody leaves, there's not a gap in the staffing. I know we have that problem here at the university, and that's a universal problem, but I was told from interviewing some of the operators that was a concern they had. So maybe making the hiring procedure quicker, easier, or creating a way of hiring people in anticipation of openings as opposed to waiting for the opening might be a good thing to do. And the cross-training, Don Smith has talked about the fact that someone needs to have the headworks as his baby, his special thing, or her special thing. And there doesn't seem to be a person in the current staffing that has taken on that role. And so that's a really extraordary request to make, that someone do that. But I believe that would be good for that to happen. I know it's tough to keep good staff, and I know working at the headworks is. I can tell you a story about Chicago. Working at the headworks is a good thing there, because when they have a drug bust, they put all the money down the sewer, and they collect $100 bills in the off the bar screens. But I don't think that happens at Hyperion, and I don't think the staffing is anticipating that. But that's sort of my answer. Who else wants to answer?
I can speak on that, Professor. This is Marcel, the acting lead operator in the liquid section now. I'm sorry I'm video off, but I am currently at Hyperion working in the headworks on a combined assignment. yeah, on overtime, mind you, because the staffing levels have been very low for quite some time. I've been working at Hyperion for about 9 years, and staffing levels have been at a low point throughout the whole time I've been here, and these COVID years have been the lowest staffing levels, with a lot of the retention and retirees. So we're definitely stretched thin, and any support we can get, we're very much looking forward to.
Thank you, Mr. Nye. Thank you for dialing in during your shift, and for your extended hours. Hang in there, and hoping to get you additional support very soon. And Mr. Smith, I see your hand raised.
Yes, I think one of the things to understand, staffing in the Bureau of Sanitation and at Hyperion has been an issue that's existed for a long time. It gets worse in certain periods of time, and certainly COVID has made it much worse. And I think it's important, not just in response to the spill, but as sanitation looks to build capability in the future for full reclamation of the wastewater. And so it's important to get ahead of that curve. And I think support needs to be provided to sanitation to identify how the vacancies can be filled, and how there seems to be a tendency over time from council districts, and I experienced this back in the 80s, when budgets were cut, positions weren't approved, and it created problems over time. And all of a sudden there were major failures, and people had to deal with that. And I think it's important for the institutions within the city to provide support to make that happen.
Thank you, Mr. Smith. And thank you for serving on the committee. And Mr. DeFetta, your hand is raised.
Yeah, good afternoon, commissioners. So I just wanted to add a few words to that. One of the things that we're doing with regards to staffing is we have a calendar in terms of working with our personnel and our admin division in terms of going through a staffing calendar and filling vacancies. So that's a priority for us. So we're working through that calendar in terms of filling vacancies. We've identified in terms of the vulnerabilities that we need to address from the ad hoc report and from the consultants. And we've looked at different areas where we see those vulnerabilities exist. So Dr. Stenstrom pointed out especially those three critical areas: headworks, IPS, and EPP, that are prone to flooding. And a lot of the systems also are impacted by the electrical system as a whole. So without the electricity, or if the electric system fails, regardless of the level of staffing or the equipment condition, everything will come to a halt. So we are asking for, say, for example, additional electricians in the upcoming budget. So our strategy is multi-approach in terms of filling all the vacancies, asking for new positions, then also working with the personnel department in terms of speeding up the hiring process. So one is the calendar of setting the new exams so that we can bring people on board, and then also then the time it takes to bring people on board, how we can speed up that process. So for example, the operators is an area where we constantly have shortages. So we have a trainee program, and as part of that trainee program right now, we are anticipating getting about 23 new, the last class just moved up to wastewater. They just finished their training program, and they've now been certified as wastewater treatment operator ones. So now we're bringing a new class again of about 23 new folks that we anticipate will be coming shortly in the next few weeks. So we've begun to call them, and then now we have to go through that background process of bringing them on board. But it is a challenge, but I think with the help from the board and from the overall city structure, I think that's something that we are committed to do under Barbara's leadership, and we are moving forward with doing that. So.
Thank you, Mr. Taveta, and thanks everyone for answering some questions on staffing and just sharing more detail about the work that has happened and is undergoing, and then plans for the future. I look forward to seeing more details in the action plan, and I'll yield the rest of my time, Madam Chair, to my other colleagues. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Calosa. Appreciate also your line of questioning. Dr. Davis, does that answer your concern?
Yes, ma'am. It is a concern, and I appreciate Commissioner Calosa addressing it as well as Mr. DeFetta. And I think it's critically important. And I just want to end by saying that we are going to have to do something special when it gets to our collaboration with personnel in terms of meeting the demands of what departments and bureaus need. That's a whole nother speech and research that I could give in terms of results in our collaboration with personnel.
Thank you, Dr. Davis. And you know, just I read through the report, and thank you so much again, everyone. And as a commissioner, not as the chair, I don't have much questions other than to say that I would want to hear a progress report on the implementation of the action plan. So if it's possible, maybe on a biannual or basis, you can come back and just let us know how that action plan is underway. And that also would include the hiring process. We want to hear, how many vacancies we have and how many are coming in and so forth. On that also, Mr. Tafeta, you said that you're training folks and you're getting folks into the training program. I imagine there's a public way that these folks can get into the training program if anybody's interested to become part of the water world with us. Is that part of your website? And I only say that because when an issue like this comes forward, a lot of folks get interested on, or at least it sparks interest in a lot of the folks. And so any of them that feel that they want to be part of the solution and would like to be trained, how would they be able to do that, Mr. Tafeta?
So right now we're coming to the end of the current list. So we did a test sometime back, and we got a whole lot of people that took the way more than enough, like 400 or 300 people applied. And so we've gone through a series of classes now, and so we're coming to the tail end of the current list. So we are about to start the process again of establishing a new list. And typically what we do is we reach out, for example, to all the trade schools. That's one avenue where we have the reaching out to all the trade techs and any other community colleges to recruit staff. We publicize stuff on our website. We send information to all current Bureau of Sanitation staff, LSN staff. So we have folks that are coming up, maybe a maintenance laborer or somebody else who is interested and they want to make a change in career, because it's a pretty well-paying work. It's difficult, but it's also pretty well-paying. So we have those multi-avenues in terms of looking at how we bring folks in. So
Exactly.
I think the process itself is robust in terms of attracting folks. I think what we need to do is just working through the process now, speeding up how we get the classes on board and what we can do to bring people in faster.
Great. Thank you, Mr. Feta. I appreciate that. I think it's important for the community to know that we are working hard on making that happen. I imagine you can also develop a training manual for the new hires, right?
We do have an extensive training program. So the way it works, and Hisang is one of the professors of that training program. So what it is once we bring people on board, they go through 6 weeks classroom training, and then they go through an on-the-job training for 1 year, and then they have to pass a state exam to get the state license, and then that's when they complete that training program. And we usually give them, I think, 2 to 3 years of a probationary period to go through that. So if you don't pass the test the first time, you get multiple tries. And so that program of training them in the class, getting everybody on the same page, and then transitioning them into the field and then working hands-on. And we found that it's worked very well for us. And a lot of the folks that are now senior operators and lead operators, they all came through that program. So that's something we're very proud of.
Got it. Thank you, Mr. Tefera. And it's a great opportunity to start a new generation of folks that will be taking care of the water for us to come. So it's good to be in this place at this time. I also heard, I think it was from you, Dr. Stenstrom, about having someone to be the head of the headworks, in other words.
Yes.
Is that Mr. Marcel? Would that be considered now Mr. Marcel, Mr. Tefera, or who would answer that?
So right now we do what we're going to do is we're going to take the recommendation of the ad hoc committee and go back and do a thorough evaluation.
Okay.
Right now we have, for example, a senior operator that is in charge of multiple areas. So part of that evaluation is whether we need to narrow the focus of, say, a lead person in a specific area. So that recommendation is taken seriously, and we just need to evaluate the entire process and then see how best to make sure that the intent of the committee is met.
Got it. Thank you. And I just going to go into more about the issue of the sensors. I imagine now with this technology we have that you can get, video on your phone and, alarms on your phone if somebody's even crossing your front door. Is there a method, or will we be implementing some kind of method that way that perhaps executive management also receive an alert on their phone that something's happening at the headworks or basically at any part of the plant? Is that, if it's not part of the action plan, can we include that as well? I think it's highly important that people get notified, any which way we can, so that this does not happen again.
So yeah, so the point is well taken. We are working on multiple approaches, as was said. In the control rooms, for example, the alarms are there. Now we have the visible alarms now that you can see with the beacons and the lights and the sirens. And so we're working on multi approaches as we speak. The vendor has actually been on site all week, and with our consultants, and Hisang and his staff have been working with them, looking at all the areas where we can add additional sensors and make the system more robust. So those and the recommendation from the ad hoc in terms of adding video capabilities and all that, all those things are what we're currently working on, how we're going to incorporate all those.
Great. And I hope that, it's also the way, like I said, you'll get a notification on your phone, because this happened on a Sunday. So if folks are not on, not a full set of staff on site, that, executive management are able to also know that something's going on their, at the plant. So just, no answer for that, just making sure that you incorporate that in there. I don't think I have anything else on my questions, but I do have a question on moving forward with the ad hoc committee. And this might be a question for my colleague, if anything, Commissioner Villegas or Mr. Sternstrom as well. What happens now? Will your committee continue to meet and monitor the progress, or is your work based, thank you, and your work is done? And I'm asking because I really don't know what's going to happen next.
I'll answer that. Ms. Teresa Villegas, the idea behind the creation of the ad hoc committee and then our request to get these advisors to join us and give us input was for this duration. In terms of the work that we asked for, is the culmination of this report. It is the responsibility of this, board to see to it, that we have, alignment between both sanitation, that is our purview, and the recommendations by these prestigious advisors that have given a lot of information to us, and really have the Bureau of Sanitation, evaluate, do an assessment, and really look at all of the recommendations, and that was part of my motion, just to be able to come back and let us know of within a time frame, and I'll get to the actual motion later, but give us a real time frame of what can be done, so that this isn't a report that's going to be shelved, but for for the work that our advisors gave to us and all their time, we're concluding that now, and it is our responsibility as a board to see to it the longevity and the realization of these recommendations.
Okay, thank you.
In collaboration, with the Bureau of Sanitation, we're not going to ask for anything that's, not going to be reasonable, and also by our, fellow, our other agency, Bureau of Engineering, who's just, part of this as well. And I'll let Director Romero, she has her hand raised as well.
Thank you.
Thank you. I have to say that I went straight into answering and didn't, say that the City of Los Angeles owes a debt of gratitude to the ad hoc advisory group for all their work and time that they spent on investigating the flooding and then the subsequent discharge. And so these recommendations, that the work that they did, the intellectual debate that we had, was very helpful. And I think, even though it's going to end here, you bet I'm going to utilize some of them to help implement aspects of it, on the operations side, on the training side, even on the resource side. So for me, I think their perspectives, are going to help, implement some of these strategies. So I look forward to continuing, even though the formality of it is ending here, but on the implementation side, there's aspects that I think even in the public information and the resource allocation, that there's aspects that I would I want to inform you that I will be utilizing them, with and working with Commissioner Villegas to help implement the action plan. So I just wanted to make sure that I had the opportunity to say thank you.
Thank you, Barbara, for that as well, for the confidence that you're sharing with us on moving forward with implementing best practices, and for this never to happen once again. Commissioner Colosa, I know you had another question. I'm gonna go to you, and then I want to see if there's anybody else that wants to say any last words on this item, that maybe something that they didn't say, that would be a good time. So, Commissioner Coloso.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just had one other question from the report, and I know that Dr. Centrum, you mentioned that these were just preliminary reports provided by our consultants, Brown and Caldwell and CDM Smith. When will the final reports be done, and when will the board get a copy of them?
Well, I think the final reports are probably imminent, but I think somebody from the Bureau of Sanitation should answer the question, because they're the ones that contracted with them. So I don't know, maybe Tracy or Tim or
Tracy
whoever
or
worked
Tim.
on it.
Yes, yes, they are imminent. They're in draft stage right now and currently going through some revisions based on comments that staff has made. So we anticipate seeing final reports within the next few weeks.
Okay. And then just to clarify by staff, is it city staff making the comments? And the reason why I asked was only because my understanding of this report before us, and then of course the report from our two consultants is that they're independent reports. So just want to, make sure that we retain the integrity of that and that these are independent reports being put together by our outside consultants.
Yes, that's correct. However, they do provide us the opportunity to review them for the accuracy and any further discussion. But the final outcome of the report is their report.
Okay, so we'll be getting copies of both shortly.
Yes.
Okay. And then this report, I know obviously it's included in our on our website in our minutes, but will this report and these two subsequent reports, will LACN make them easy to access on your Hyperion website? Just want to make sure that everyone impacted can follow where we are in the process, because there's so many moving pieces that they can, look at and read the reports themselves.
Yes, absolutely, we can do that.
Okay, great. Thank you, Ms. Minamita. Mr. DeFetta, did you unmute?
Yeah, I think it was all covered. So as far as, I'll give you an example. CDM, they are on site right now as we speak. They've been there all week. So there's further work that is ongoing. So the report is going to, I can assure you, it's independent, but at the same time, it's back and forth in terms of they have questions. They have to talk to they're talking to operators, they're talking to our staff. We see issues that we discuss in terms of, how those, if there are things that they need a clear understanding or an explanation, we provide those to them. So that's the form of interaction, to just make sure that the information of what's happening at the plant is captured accurately into the report, and then the recommendations are their recommendations, or their findings are their findings, and then we go about towards the implementation.
Thank you for clarifying. I just wanted to understand that a little bit better, to make sure that it's the intent that we had in mind when we had these reports conducted. And that's it for me, Madam Chair. Thank you for allowing me to ask those additional questions.
No, of course, and any other commissioner as well. Dr. Stenstrom, I see your hand up.
Yes. I wanted to say a couple of parting things. You see what the Bureau of Sanitation has to maintain here. This is just an idea of a chopper. People were asking about that. But the reason I wanted to speak is I wanted to thank all of the committee members for their help and their contributions. I mean, I gave the final report as if it might seem that I did most of the work, but I didn't. We had many contributions from the other participants on the committee, and I especially appreciate the committee's tolerance for all the typos in my early drafts. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Stenstrom. I'm going to move it along to Commissioner Villegas. Villegas, do you want to close up our today's discussion?
Sure. Thank you so much. As you can all see, this subject matter is multi-layered. I really appreciate and thank LA Sanitation for really making themselves vulnerable. This is when we're at our lowest point is when we learn the most. And certainly, an incident like what happened on July 11th isn't something that we take lightly. By former President Good's leadership, we were able to create the ad hoc committee because we're really scrutinizing and really delving deeper into what happened here. I think that just sharing the information that Professor Stenstrom did today, you can see it is not easy if we don't have a experience or background dealing with any kind of reclamation plants. But first and foremost is the public trust. Seeing that we had a spill over the summer, we really need to regain that trust. As former President Good mentioned, we are a renowned reclamation plant in the United States, and we intend on implementing some, the Green New Deal, where we can be Hyperion 2035, 100%, water recycling facility. And that is the intent. And to get to that point and then to where we are today is really delving deep and really identifying everything that needs to happen. So this was, it sounds odd saying this in such an engineering world, but it was a lot of soul searching to be able to get to the point that we're at today. It's definitely not taken at all lightly. And the path going forward is one that is, it's probably, challenging in terms of financial aspect, in terms of, re-engineering some pieces or redesigning some areas. Those are not easy. We have and we, I'm sure that, these are going to be long-term, some of these are going to be long-term projects. I do want to let everyone know, just to put it on the record, this report was shared with LA County Public Health. It's part of our recommendations also, just to foster that communication with them. And they were able to review the report and continue to collaborate with LA Sanitation staff to be able to ensure that, the right protocols are in place. And really foster a stronger relationship between both agencies, because we're both equally important, and the public deserves beach closure immediately after an incident like this happens. I just wanted to put that on record. I was going to say President Good, former President Good, did you have anything else to add before I just go into a motion?
Muted.
Yep. Just reiterating my thanks and my encouragement and cajoling and urging for everybody to buckle up and continue with the great work. The stakes are high, and this is the work we've talked about for the last 3 hours is some of the most important work that's going to happen in this region over the next decade, whether folks realize it or not. So I'm excited about the leadership of Director Romero and this board and everyone here, and let's make this thing the standard of the world.
Wonderful, thank you for that. All right, so this is just for a procedural. So sorry, go on.
I'm sorry. I apologize, Commissioner Vegas. I did want to add one more thing, which I was derelict in not really being clear about earlier, which is I want to thank you and your leadership and being such a partner with the ad hoc. It has been a pleasure, and so thank you very much.
Thank you as well. I really appreciate that. I think we all take our responsibilities really seriously. So the amount of time and effort that everybody placed into this is it spoke volumes. But we all kind of geeked out on this issue. Sorry, don't mean to offend any of our fellow engineers. It was really interesting, just because we do take this seriously. With that, I was just going to put forward a motion just for procedural. We're going to receive and file the advisor's reports and ask and direct the Bureau of Sanitation just to report back in about 90 days, just on the assessment of financial and operational feasibility of the recommendations by the advisor's report. And I just wanted to put that on record.
So is that a motion from you, Commissioner Villegas?
I just got my master's and I've been promoted to... Just pushing you to get your doctor's already.
Yes, she promoted.
It is indeed a motion. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Villegas. Appreciate that. Also, this is aside from the implementation process. So once the action plan has been developed and publicized and so forth, after that is when I would like to see biannual reports of the implementation of process. So just to make that distinguished, so that we're all clear on that. Do we need to add anything to that, Dr. Campos?
No, Commissioner Villegas's motion was clearly articulated to receive and file the report as amended to instruct the Bureau of Sanitation to report back in 90 days on the assessment of the financial and operational feasibility of the recommendations by the advisor's report. So that just restating the her motion.
Okay.
Yeah, it can be oral report is fine.
Yeah, yes, definitely. Oral report, definitely. Okay. There's a motion on the table by Commissioner Villegas. Is there a second to move this item forward to receive and file the report from the ad hoc committee?
Second.
Second by Dr. Davis. Any objections, colleagues? Calosa. And myself, no objections for myself either. With that, Dr. Campos, we have a motion by Commissioner Villegas, second by Dr. Davis. Should we take a roll call?
Absolutely, Madam Chair. And just for clarification, it's a motion to receive and file as amended to instruct the Bureau to report back. So just that's the vote that's before your board at this time. We'll go ahead and start the voting. We'll start with you, Madam Chair.
Aye.
President Pro Tem Davis.
Aye.
Commissioner Caloza.
Aye.
And Commissioner Villegas.
Aye.
This motion is adopted and carries unanimous. Madam Chair, would you like to consider this item to go forthwith?
Yes, please.
Thank you.
All right. Well, thank you everyone for a lovely morning, and appreciate all the work that went into this. Obviously, common ground here is that we want to make sure that the community, the residents, our ocean life, and our ocean remains with integrity. And I appreciate the work that sanitation has done, is doing, and will continue to do to improve their process. So with that, thank you, President Good, for joining us this morning. It was nice to see you, and I appreciate everybody's time. Have a great weekend, everyone. We'll see you all next Wednesday for our regularly scheduled Board of Public Works meeting. Commissioners, 5 minutes, and then we'll re-meet again.
Oh, okay.
Goodbye, everyone.
Bye.